just wanted to give you a sense of, ADB's been working on CCUS for over a decade. We put a lot of effort, grant money, staff time into it. Perhaps it was ahead of its time, but now we're kind of comforted to see that there is demand from our clients now. So we remain very keen. And we will continue to engage, and we look forward to working with all stakeholders to see how we can catalyze increasing amounts of pilots and commercial projects in this space across the Asia Pacific. We've got engagements going on in Indonesia, in India, and happy to engage with any of our clients that might be interested. So today's session, we've got a really good panel, of experts and practitioners who are going to talk to you about their experiences, their challenges, examples from different parts of the world. And I would encourage all of you to interact, to ask questions, and to debate, and help ADB as well to sort of walk away with some distilled thoughts that we can use to support the sector going forward. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very interesting session. And let me now invite Bernadine Smith, who is a Principal Policy, Finance and Regulation from the Global CCS Institute. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. As Pradeep said, I'm the Principal for Policy, Regulation and Commercial at the Global CCS Institute. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. We have a poll in this session consisting of 15 questions. We will have 5 questions now, and then just before the panel discussion, another 5, and at the end, another 5. So we would like all of you to just access your app and go to full program. Then choose session 4.3, and then choose poll, and the questions will probably be there. So if my colleagues at the ADB can put up the questions or the answers, that would really be appreciated. And while you're all looking at that, I can maybe just quickly give you a short introduction. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the ADB for having CCUS on the main menu this year. It really deserves a position on the agenda. And also thank you for allowing me to open this session today. And I just want to elaborate on what Pradeep said. The CCUS as a technology is vitally important for the world to reach net zero. And this message came out of the IPCC's 6th assessment synthesis report, where 6 of the 7 scenarios that they ran in terms of a 1.5 scenario, and also a few scenarios to keep under 2 degrees. In 6 of those scenarios, CCUS were included, and the remaining scenario required a significant reduction in global energy demand, which is potentially unlikely to happen. So CCUS has a potentially significant role to play in reaching net zero. And also in the IEA's net zero emissions scenario, CCUS accounts for 15% of cumulative emission reductions to reach that target by 2050. So I believe it's a timely discussion that we have now, and there's a lot to do in order to achieve the global climate targets that we have set. All right. I don't know if the question will come up. Can everyone see the questions in the poll? Okay. If you can answer, I don't know how it's going to go. 1 to 5. All right, there you go. Question 2. Only 9 votes. Can you please vote for question 2? Which is the most promising CO2 capture technology? Are these the answers? Like a third, a third, a third. That's good. All right. Do we have more questions? Results for more questions? Question 1. What is likely to be the cost of CO2 capture in the next 5 years in coal-based power generation? And 44% said $50 per ton. Right, interesting answers. Next one. Number 3. Which industry do you see the largest potential for capture by 2035? A third, a third, a third for those three: hydrogen, cement, and steel. And number 4? Oh, this is great to see so many people from South Asia and Southeast Asia. Great. And the last one? Right, so can we just hear from some people in the audience, what are the other industries that you are from? If not power or steel? Sorry? Okay. Okay, good. Right, thank you very much. If you can please put on my presentation, that would be great. Thank you. So I'm going to kick off this session by providing an overview on the global status of CCS. And while they are putting my presentation on, there you go. So something about the Institute. We are an international non-profit climate change think tank with offices in Melbourne, where our headquarters are, and also in Washington, DC, Houston, London, Brussels, Abu Dhabi, Beijing, and Tokyo. So we are a member-based organization. We have more than 200 members. I think more towards 230 members at the moment. And we produce thought leadership pieces on a regular basis, as well as bespoke reports for clients and members. And we have some flagship annual publications, which you can find on our website, including the Global Status of CCS, our Technology Compendium, and an analysis of COP outcomes that we produce every year. For our members, all of our literature is available, and for the public, a selection of the literature is available. And you can go to our website, globalccsinstitute.com, to find all of this. All right, the CCS project pipeline has exhibited very strong growth year on year over the last 6 to 7 years, growing at a compound rate of more than 35% per annum since 2017. As of March 2024, we have 43 facilities in operation and just over 50 million tonnes per annum of capture capacity. There are 33 facilities in construction and 488 facilities in other stages of development before construction. We've also seen facilities entering construction in 5 countries during the first quarter of 2024, in Australia, Denmark, China, and Canada. Now, this growth has largely been driven by policy development, particularly in North America, Canada, the US, and also in the EU. And we have also seen an acceleration of interest in CCS in the APAC region, and concrete developments in terms of policy and the development of regulatory frameworks. For example, Japan, Indonesia, and South Korea. And as Pradeep said this morning, although this is very encouraging to see that there's so much development, we still have a very long way to go. We are at 50 million tonnes per annum at the moment operating, and we need to get to 1 gigatons per annum by 2030. Policy support to provide certainty and financial support are the 2 key issues that we need to accelerate a large-scale deployment of CCS. In terms of projects in the pipeline, it's also encouraging to see accelerated development in APAC. We have 12 operating projects, 11 in China and 1 in Australia. And Japan also announced support for 7 CCUS value chains where CO2 will be captured in Japan and stored offshore. And 2 of these projects will be cross-boundary transport of CO2 to other countries. As reported in the Institute's Global Status of CCS in 2023, operating capacity is also growing year on year, And the chart that you see in this slide, if you look at the top there, the projects in all stages of development, capture capacity is now in the region of about 450 million tons per annum. So if all these projects come online, that is the capacity that we will have, and we're still short of the 1 gigatons per annum that we need. In 2023, we also saw a number of new countries starting to develop commercial CCS projects, and these countries include Bulgaria, Croatia, Egypt, Germany, Greece, Japan, Libya, Oman, Papua New Guinea, Poland, and Russia. So that's really encouraging to see. And the top 5 countries in terms of total number of facilities across all stages of development are still the US by a large margin, the UK, Canada, China, and Norway. The Institute will release its annual update around October, November, when these figures will be updated, and I encourage you to just go to our website for the annual update in 2024. If you look at the application of CCS across industries, in our 2023 GSR, we can see that there is the birth of a new industry. See over there. Not working. CO2 transport and storage. As of July 2023, there were 101 transport and storage projects in the CCS project pipeline, and each of these projects aim to provide CO2 storage and transport as a service as a third party, where they leverage the risk advantages and the economies of scale of a network concept. And these transport and storage projects are really gearing up in anticipation of a robust future demand for CO2 to be stored. The most notable projects that you see in the blue dots are Project Greensand in Denmark, which has commenced its pilot phase, Northern Lights project that we all know are already signing bilateral agreements for capture and cross-boundary transport to the North Sea, and then also Porthos project in the Netherlands that commenced construction recently. So if you look at the trends since the beginning of 2024, so really just over the last 4.5 months, the first trend most notable has been the transboundary transport of CO2 and the focus that the world has placed on this. We will hear more about this from some of our other speakers, but this slide just shows the development that happened in the first 4 months of this year. There's a plethora of activities going on globally, and it's really private sector proponents coming together to do studies on value chains from one country to another, and governments gearing up to support these proponents in negotiating and signing bilateral agreements and arrangements that are compliant with the London Protocol. And we also believe that this will be the key activity for governments over the next couple of years, is to get those bilaterals in place to support proponents in the cross-boundary movement of CO2. Right, a second trend to point out is the acceleration in policy, legal, and regulatory developments. And we can really categorize that into 2 categories. First of all, we see legal and regulatory frameworks being developed in countries who are following the first movers and using those examples. For example, in the Middle East, we see announcements of legal and regulatory frameworks being developed based on the models we see in the EU, UK, Canada, the US and Australia. And then the second category, these first movers are now refining their incentives and their strategies to help these projects get off the ground and support the large-scale deployment of CCS. A third trend that we see apart from Europe, where we know a couple of bilateral agreements have been concluded in recent months, we are also seeing a lot of activity in the Middle East and the APAC region. And in addition to what I have on the slide there, there's also Angia, who is currently conducting the carbon certification for cross-border CCS study, which aims to build consensus and understanding across the Asia-Pacific region around how CO2 emission reductions will be accredited and certified in the region. And this study is conducted over 2 years, and it will really also provide support for the regional movement cross-boundary of CO2. And finally, across the globe, financial support for CCUS has ramped up significantly. However, as mentioned earlier, there is still a very long way to go to reach that 1 gigaton per annum by 2030. Not only will this require governments to continue to accelerate policy and legal and regulatory framework development, but also financial support. And the financial support will have to come from the public and the private sector if we want to see a large-scale rollout of these projects. This will be particularly important in the APAC region, where current emissions from China, India, and the rest of Asia account for around 56% of global emissions, according to the website Our World in Data. And the other thing to remember is that these emissions need to be reduced in an environment of population growth and the resultant growth in energy demand. So it is really a challenge for the APAC region going forward to 2030 and then to 2050. So with that challenge, I would like to conclude my presentation and invite the next speaker to come up, Dr. Arnab Dutta. You can come. So Dr. Arnab Dutta obtained his PhD in chemistry from Arizona State University in the USA in 2012 under the supervision of Professor Anne K. Jones. And next he developed biomimetic catalysts for H2 activation with Dr. Wendy J. Shaw at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory before shifting back to India. And since 2020, Arnab has been working as a faculty member in the chemistry department at the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, where he is pursuing his research interest in creating bio-inspired synthetic catalysts for green hydrogen production and CO2 mitigation. He is the co-founder and the director of the clean tech startup Organovac Pty Private Limited. So I hope I said that correctly. Welcome, Arnab.
So good morning all, and it is very nice, thanks to ADB for this opportunity to represent how India is moving in the CCUS. So first of all, as all discussed, that India is one of the largest producers of carbon dioxide, although per capita carbon dioxide emission is quite low in India because of the population. We actually produce almost 7% of the global carbon dioxide emission. And as it is mentioned, we are going to grow further as the population growing. We will be contributing more. So how to balance that? So first of all, we like to understand what is the overall scenario. Carbon dioxide is not something new in the global system. It is there from the start of the Earth, and we have been balancing that through photosynthesis and respiration nicely. However, with the evolution of fossil fuels and their utilization at a large scale, it actually opens the box. So it creates a one-way traffic where we are getting a huge amount of carbon dioxide accumulated with no one to take care of. And that is actually creating this climate change. Our goal is to specifically look into this extra carbon dioxide we are providing from the anthropogenic activities and how we are going to balance it. First, we have to capture it. It shouldn't be living out in the atmosphere. Secondly, convert it to some chemicals or store it. So over here, India is taking a global lead over the last 15 years. And although we are actually growing further, we are looking forward how we can balance it out. And for that, we bring out the Trinity. We need to have global policies, which is going to implement the different system we need to do. Innovations coming from the academia, all the radical ideas to put inside so that we can remove the carbon dioxide and handle it properly. And finally, the industries. In India, more than 85% of it is coming from the hard to abate industries as point sources. So they are going to implement that. So first, the global policies. So India actually have developed that in multiple fronts. The apex policymakers in India is the Niti Aayog, is the government agency which actually oversees all the applications. And they actually spearheaded this particular initiation. And they have developed different committees who are actually looking for that and develop one of the first policy roadmap that what we are going to do, what is the current scenario. And then the rest of the ministries also took over, and all the ministries are connected to one of the hard to abate sectors. For an example, Ministry of Petroleum, Ministry of Power, Ministry of Steel, and all of them are developing in their own silos how to do it, and the Niti Aayog is ensuring that all of them are connected properly. And last year in G20, India has taken the lead to showcase how India is growing and how they're not only aligning to this system of CCUS, but also able to lead that, specifically as with one of the fastest growing economy all around the world. So the different steps, what we are doing. First, the initial step is understanding the carbon footprint around the world, because any industry you go, you ask them, what is your carbon footprint? They give you an estimated number. So what is the correct estimate? Until we have that, we cannot make a right plan. And for that, as we are going for more digitalization, can we have a setup in the industries where we can monitor the carbon dioxide footprint in our smartphones? And for that, the different startups are coming, where the Digital India and the CCUS is actually combining together. And there are multiple different startups has grown into this particular sector. Some of them has informed over there. And this is very ably supported by the Ministry of Information and Technology. And also one particular setup has been developed by Government of India, Nidhi Prayas, which specifically supports these startups looking for this particular fund. And over there are multiple different places we have already started working. Second thing is the capturing, the most important part. And carbon dioxide capturing is, as mentioned, it's not something new, but we are not really doing that for the sake of carbon dioxide removal, because we want to do something else. And over there, adsorbent technologies, the M1-based technologies is the most common one. And they are actually happening at different scales. Now in India, we have developed some of the early pilot plants at different places, starting from the northern part of India, where we have the power plant, NTPC, again, a government agency supported system, which actually set up one of the 20-ton carbon dioxide capture unit. We have Tata Steel in the eastern part, actually having one. In the southern part, Tuticorin, close to Madras, they are actually also having one of the largest carbon dioxide capture unit. So this is actually coming now. The industries are looking forward to how to develop these particular plants. And over there, I want to mention that the startup also coming, including ours, how we can go even beyond MEs, because what the poll question comes is very correct, that the carbon dioxide capture cost. Then the question is, after carbon dioxide capture, what is the next? Because most of the plants, when you're capturing carbon dioxide, the end product is pure carbon dioxide. So basically, we are filtering out carbon dioxide from the flue gas. Until and unless we are actually moving forward to convert that to some other useful chemical, that is not really encouraging from the industries. So that is why we look into like what are the different chemicals we make, and that is actually needed at a large scale. So looking into that, there are different combinations are actually already working in place. For an example, carbon dioxide to methanol, that is done by the power plant. Soda ash, it is done by the chemical industries. Some of the petrochemical industries are also doing bioproduct, connecting it to biology and making some biomass or some very high value chemicals. We are actually making minerals, carbonates, which can be directly connected to the steel or cement industry. And also the low-hanging fruit for the petrochemical industries, can we do enhanced oil recovery? And we didn't do this, as we can see in the picture, we are actually closing the loop of carbon dioxide and making it a circular economy, which is very useful for them. Secondly, some ADB is actually taking a very huge role in this particular system, because before we implement the large plants, we have to understand we are actually investing it correctly and doing it correctly. And for them, a lot of feasibility reports has been developed. ADB has spearheaded on that, specifically carbon dioxide to urea with one of the cement industry and carbon dioxide to beverage industries at small scale for petrochemical industry. Finally, the sequestration. We can capture a lot of carbon dioxide, but how much we want to convert? Because we have to remove close to 1 billion tons. Do we really require all these chemicals in 1 billion tons? Answer is no. So we have to put a lot of the amount, almost 80 to 90%, under the ground for sequestration. So for that, in India, in 2020, for the first time, we understand how much is the storage space we have. And we found we have close to 600 billion tons of carbon dioxide storage space. and how to connect them. So we go for this hub and cluster model. We find out exactly where the carbon dioxide is actually getting produced in hard-to-abate industries, and can we put a storage space nearby so that we can have a very nice continued flow of carbon dioxide and we can store that out. And over there, I want to mention one particular story, how India is taking a little bit unique way. So Department of Science and Technology in India, they have developed this National Center of Excellence, right? We have 3 of them, and one of them at IIT Bombay, my mother institute. And over there, what we did, we connect to the industry directly. We ask them, what is the problem you're facing? And then working with them together, we're trying to find the solution. So we are working on the realistic measure, not in the ideal case. And over there, we are trying to put all the young students who will be the next future, who is going to take the lead, connecting to them. And from there, we started having these new ideas coming that actually contributed to start of our new startup, Urja Novak. And our students are also contributing in the different global events. So this is actually showing a very nice way how to connect all the points together and bringing us to a better future. And over there, this is one of my last slides. So over there, we expect that India is going to grow further. We are going to contribute carbon dioxide more. But by that time we're contributing, we'll be ready to remove that carbon dioxide and handle it properly. And as we said, this is actually a challenge. It is, but we want to make sure that this challenge becomes a perfect opportunity for India to grow further and working all around the globe to make a global solution for CCUS. And with that, I would like to thank you all, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dutta. The next speaker is from JOGMEC, Ms. Masumi Takanashi, and I would like to call her up to the stage, please. Masumi-san is the director of the CCS project department at JOGMEC. She has 20 years of experience in the energy industry and is currently working with the government on the design of incentives and other support schemes to promote CCS in the country. She is also the co-author of JOGMEC's CCS and Carbon Intensity Guidelines, the CCS Carbon Credit Handbook, and she is responsible for research on business environmental laws and regulations related to CCS, cross-border CO2 transportation, CO2 count in CCS value chains, and CCS carbon markets. And as a member of the experts committee, she worked on drafting the JCM CCUS guideline in 2023, which will enable CCUS projects to generate carbon credits in the joint crediting mechanism between the partner countries and Japan. She's also currently part of the government-led experts group on the development of a carbon credit methodology for ADAC project in Japan. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Bernadine-san. And thank you for ADB and Sakai-san for inviting us to be here. And I am very thankful the opportunity to share our initiative in this prominent event. And my presentation is about JOGMEC's initiatives with some focuses on CCS carbon credits and cross-border goods transportation. Our CCS project department is supporting the designing the rules, systems, and incentive schemes of CCS value chain under METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. JOGMEC is The JOGMEC is a governmental agency that ensures a stable supply of natural resources to Japan. And last year, our governing law of JOGMEC was amended, and the new business areas such as CCS, hydrogen and ammonia, and wind power have been added to our existing business areas such as oil and gas, metals, coals, and geothermal. JOGMEC is the only government organization in Japan which has rich technical expertise with more than 50 years of experience of subsurface evaluation and resource development area. This expertise allows us to provide advanced technical support for CCS projects in Japan and overseas. And we have a unique We are a unique organization with 3 different features. Firstly, we are a policy implementation body under METI of Japan. And secondly, we provide technical assistance to the industry. We have published several technical guidelines. Thirdly, we have financial assistance function, mainly focused on the equity capital and the liability guarantee, debt guarantee, covering CCS projects, and launched our subsidies program last year under METI, which is called Japanese Advanced CCS Project, covers entire value chain of CCS project. In today's presentation, I will briefly touch upon our activities, especially on the number 2 and number 3. The Japanese government estimated the annual storage capacity for CCS in Japan is about 120 to 240 million tons in 2050. As the first step to store 6 to 12 million tons per year by 2030, final investment decision is needed by 2026. And our subsidies program is the government support scheme to achieving this goal and schedule. Regarding the new CCS Business Act of Japan, the current parliament passed this act on May 24th with its purpose of establishment of a permit system for drilling and storage project. JOGMEC will take a key role in this new legislation. As our part of technical assistance functions, JOGMEC released the second edition of Carbon Intensity Guidelines, which outlines carbon intensity calculation method for LNG, hydrogen, ammonia, and synthetic methane. And this guideline also covers methane emission management based on the actual project measurement. And we have also published the CCS guideline with special focus on CO2 storage for safe and proper implementation of technology and methodology for the quantification of CO2 storage volume of CCS projects. And we also published the CCS Carbon Credit Handbook, which is summary report of the international workshop focusing on especially latest trends and various challenges of carbon credit around CCS. And 2 of my colleagues are here, and they have some of their this handbook, so you can come to us to pick up. And I brought here the sample slide from our handbook to briefly touch on the role of carbon credits. The diagram on the right illustrates the multiple revenue resources in the Northern Lights CCS case. The project realizes the CCS cost range of 30 to 55 euro per ton after 2034 by leveraging multiple revenue resources, such as being exempt from carbon tax and EU ETS compliance costs, and EU and Norwegian government subsidies for CapEx and OpEx. The project also envisages to generate voluntary carbon credits for captured CO2 from the facility, which is not covered by the EU ETS. I believe the support measures on CCS should be a combination of multiple incentives, and the carbon credit is one of the important incentives. Cross-border CO2 transportation is also an essential part of decarbonization of industry, not only in Japan, but also in other countries who are facing the challenges of uneven storage distribution of suitable CO2 storage site. The Asia-Pacific region is expected to have sufficient storage potential like in Europe, and CCS value chain, including CO2 cross-border transportation, would become an important business model in the near future. We are surprised at the workshop with warmly welcomed more than 1,100 legislation from 15 countries. We are preparing the summary report of this workshop also. And let me skip this slide. And okay, as one of our finance assistance functions, JOGMEC introduced new supporting scheme for CCS project last year. which is a subsidies program under METI and called as Japanese Advanced CCS Project. METI and JOGMEC selected 7 projects for the budget of 2023, 5 for domestic storage and 2 for overseas storage, which plan to store 13 million tons per year in 2030. We supported the total cost for feasibility study and pre-study for drilling. And through this project, we are currently analyzing the potential technical and business risks in entire value chain to explore the bankable business model in Japan and the Asian region. Currently, another bidding process is ongoing, which the upper budget is 18.8 billion yen. It is almost equivalent to more than 130 million USD, covers again all the value chain. And let me skip this. And regarding the international collaboration, JOGMEC has been engaging with the ASEAN Center for Energy. Sorry, I missed the spell. It should be ASEAN Center for Energy, ACE, to investigate a regulatory readiness for CCS in ASEAN countries, including cross-border CO2 transportation. We have interviewed the governments of the countries, and the joint research report has been published in May. You can access the report through the QR code. And we have many more international collaboration in the region under ASEC and in the Asia CCS Network framework. And this is my final presentation. We believe that multiple initiatives will lead to the realization of CCS value chain in Japan and the Asian region. As I mentioned, we are a governmental organization with strong, unique features, and we value the international collaborations with you and the government and financial organizations such as ADB and private banks and the industries in Asia Pacific for moving forward together to realize the CCS value chain. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Masumi-san. You can take your place at the table here. And I would like to call up our next speaker, Dr. Thomas Koller. Thomas is the Regional Hydrogen and CCUS Lead for APAC at DNV, advising on the energy transition and the opportunities and challenges of hydrogen and related technologies. He has a background in policy development, regulation and law, with experience in the UK, Europe and across Asia Pacific. Prior to joining DNV, Thomas designed and directed the Gas Goes Green strategic decarbonisation project for the regulated gas networks in the UK. He previously worked in the biomethane sector, advising developers on green gas generation incentives, accreditation, certification, and policy. He has a master's in international law and a PhD in international environmental law and ethics. Thomas is based in Perth, Australia. Thank you, Thomas.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction and to ADB for the invitation to join you today. So I work for DNV, as you heard, the Regional Hydrogen CCUS segment lead for DNV in Asia Pacific. DNV is a risk assurance and engineering advisory company. We are headquartered in Norway and have been actively involved in the Northern Lights project, working with Norwegian companies and others involved in that. And I wanted to share some lessons learned from that project and some of the other CCS projects that are happening elsewhere in the world that have been introduced today, and I think provide good lessons for APAC. First, I did want to sort of build on the introductory comments from Pradeep and Bernardine on the role of CCS in the energy transition. And this chart from our energy transition outlook modeling shows where we are most likely heading. This is based on current policy, current investment. We see CCS globally picking up quite slowly over the next 25 years, and by 2050 capturing 6% of global emissions. This equates to 1.25 gigatons of carbon emissions being captured, the majority of it from industrial processes in ammonia, hydrogen, e-fuel production, and in the manufacturing of iron and steel. This, while a relatively slow and stable growth, as you can see, this is still a challenge in terms of the technology, in terms of the enabling policy, and certainly in terms of the economics. But what I wanted to stress was that despite this challenge, this does still not put us on a pathway to net zero. For that, we need something more like the chart on the left here, which is even steeper. So to reach net zero, we need CO2 capture at point sources. We need to remove existing sources of CO2 using bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, using direct air capture and storage, and through nature-based solutions. And as you can see on the chart, this journey over the next 25 years, far beyond the 1.25 gigatons of our current forecast, we need to be heading towards 8 gigatons for net zero. So I just wanted to start with those sort of sobering thoughts, and this is why I think it's important to learn from previous projects and build on those successes, learn from what perhaps hasn't been such a success. So I've got, I think I've got 5 examples to go through here, 5 or 6 examples. So I'll move through these fairly fast, but if anyone has any questions, happy to discuss any of the particular examples in more detail afterwards and in the panel discussion. A first lesson is that storage is not necessarily novel. We have storage, it works. Here I highlight the Sleipner project in Norway. This was the starting point for offshore storage, 1996. It was the first industrial scale offshore CCS project, around 1 million tons of CO2 being stored annually each year. This was being separated from the produced gas, clean, compressed, and then re-injected underground. This project is soon to reach year 30 and conclude its operation. So I think it's a really excellent example that demonstrates that we have storage projects at scale and they work. Another lesson is the value of the seismic monitoring. So Sleipner has some of the best geology for injectivity. It has some of the best capacity in the world for storage, but it also has very good seismic data and subsurface studies number in the hundreds for this part of the world. Now it's great to strive for that sort of level of subsurface understanding, but we're not always going to be able to achieve that. So a lesson perhaps to take is that we can take the approach of oil and gas efficiencies over time. A second project to highlight is Snøhvit. This is the first offshore CO2 pipeline project, and following initiation in 2008, there was rapid pressure buildup, with the storage capacity promised of the project then being called into question. Seismic monitoring confirmed that CO2 was being contained within a small isolated channel in the formation, and this was causing the rapid pressure buildup. So the injection was ceased, and then the same well was used to inject into an overlying layer, which eased pressure. And then in 2016, a new injector was drilled into a separate fault compartment to avoid contamination of the produced gas. So compartmentalization is another lesson to be learned in terms of how we structure these projects. The CarbonNet project is a project in Australia, in Victoria. The feed for this project is completed, and what I think is important to be learned from in this regard, as well as the liquid or supercritical CO2 pipeline that's going to be used to connect the Latrobe Valley, where the emitters are, to the storage. CarbonNet's funded by the Victorian and Australian governments, and on commencing this initiative, they really needed to build up the capacity and the process in terms of how they were going to work on regulation, on the business models, how they were going to suitably distance themselves, this different part of government, from the regulator, and ensure there was that separation. Another lesson is that despite it being government-led, it still took 9 years to resolve issues between state and federal bodies in terms of where the storage was in relation to the national line that separates state and federal interests. Sticking with Australia, we also have Gorgon. This project aims to capture between 3.4 and 4 million tons of CO2 emissions per year, so a total of 120 million tons over the project's planned lifetime. And this equates to about 40% of the emissions from the LNG facility. To date, it's stored 5 million tons of CO2. And enabling legislation is the first lesson I wanted to highlight for this project, and the importance of doing this way ahead of time. So Western Australia had to pass the Barrow Island Act in 2003 to enable offshore production, gas processing infrastructure on Barrow Island, and put the indemnification regime in place, put the environmental requirements in place. That was 2003, and Gorgon started injecting 16 years later in 2019. A second lesson is pressure management. So in 2021, the regulator in Western Australia ordered Gorgon to reduce the volumes that they were injecting as sand was blocking the well. And this was compromising the pressure management system. Now, there is a planned mitigation for increasing water injection and therefore easing injection pressure for CO2, but the industry has been set back somewhat by this issue and the negativity in the wider press that it caused. So certainly other projects can learn from this, both in terms of the technical aspects here, but also in terms of how this was communicated with the wider industry. And I think transparency is important for this burgeoning industry. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip Quest. Public acceptance and public engagement is very important, and want to finish on Northern Lights. This is Norway's transport, receiving terminal and storage project. It'll start operation next year and will be the first cross-border, open market, open source transport and storage network. Building this end-to-end value chain has many lessons for other projects. I'm going to call out three. First, the receiving infrastructure for CO2. This needs to be designed to meet a predetermined CO2 specification. I'm pleased that DNV led the task force on the liquid CO2 specification for Northern Lights. This involves rules on material integrity, operability, health, safety, environmental considerations, and crucial to have that in place. That is publicly available. No project needs to redesign that. They can look, or not from scratch anyway, they can look to what's out there for Northern Lights and build off that. Similarly, another specification, this is number 2, was required for ships, for jetty. So we've now published a CO2, Northern Lights has published a CO2 cargo quality specifications document and international ship-shore interface standards. Again, these are public. And the third learning from this is business models. These have now been developed. So there are NDAs, there's technical information for would-be participants, there are heads of terms, there's a fully termed transport and storage agreement. Again, these do not need to be reinvented. So I'll finish there, hopefully some useful lessons from existing projects that APAC can take and build upon to advance and accelerate our work in this part of the world. Thank you. Look forward to questions as part of the panel.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Please take your place at the table. And our last speaker today is Mr. Daisuke Fujihashi. He is with Mitsui OSK Lines, or MOL, since 1999. And in July 2023, he was appointed Deputy General Manager of Environment and Sustainability Strategy Division, and he was responsible for the EU ETS project team. From April 2024, he is now the General Manager of Carbon Solution Projects, Carbon Solution Development Unit at MOL. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all. Thank you for kind introduction, and thanks ADB for giving us this opportunity. Okay, I will explain the challenges regarding CO2 transportation as a general info and our company MOL's initiatives. I will proceed according to the agenda shown here. Firstly, I want to introduce MOL briefly. MOL is one of the world's leading shipping companies, operating nearly 800 ships all over the world. In recent years, in addition to our shipping business, such as dry bulk, energy, and product transportation, we have been focusing on the other non-shipping business, such as carbon credit and investment in the upstream of next generation energy, like ammonia and hydrogen. One of our main futures is that we are aiming to contribute global society as an infrastructure company through a business activity. This slide shows the business range of MOL's CO2 value chain. We are now involved in the management and operation on the commercial CO2 transport ship. MOL aims to be a business operating company from upstream to downstream of CO2 value chain, focusing on liquefied CO2 transport ships. As you know, the CCS is currently not a commodity business, but a business that exists within specific regions and trade patterns. This slide shows 5 representative regions. For North-South America, we currently see the potential for shorter maritime transportation demand. As a cargo is determined by 2 factors, temperature and the pressure, as shown on the left of this slide. Currently, the number of liquefied CO2 transport ships is very limited, and all of them operate under medium temperature and pressure conditions, represented by the orange-colored area within the liquid condition. Please see the area circled in red in the table on the right. The density of CO2 is higher at the low temperature and pressures, which is advantageous for transporting larger quantity of CO2. However, this condition is close to the triple point where solid, liquid, and vapor phases, and if mishandled, the cargo can be dry ice. And you can see the triple point is very close to the area showing in gray on the left table. Here, I'm explaining the pros and cons of each conditions. As I explained, transporting CO2 at a low temperature and pressure allows for the transport of larger quantities. Until recently, the demand for shorter distance CO2 transportation was normal, but moving forward, the transport of larger quantity of CO2 over longer distance across countries will be necessary. Despite the challenge to transport more CO2, it is necessary to commercialize low temperature and pressure CO2 transport ships. The changing topic, this slide shows legal preparation that applies when the transporting and storing CO2 between 2 countries. Currently, the London Protocol exists as the only international regulatory framework. However, simply saying, the preparations are not yet fully advanced. So this is an example of the ongoing cross-border CO2 transport and the CCUS initiatives in countries around the world. This is about the effort of Malaysia and Japan, and Australia and South Korea, respectively. This slide explains the challenges that need to be considered regarding how the specifications of CO2 affect operations. I understand that it is important to ensure the stability of fixation under the ground and safety for handling CO2. This slide explains the economic aspect, which I believe everybody have a great interest. This shows it costs at least total 120 euro per ton of CO2 from capture to storage operations. For transportation, the distance and the size of the ship have a significant impact. On the right, I have shown the price trend of emission allowance under the rule of EU ETS. That is the reason I priced all by euro currency. I hereby emphasize that the formalization of the carbon pricing rule has a significant impact on the progress of CCUS. For economic viability, the total cost of the CCUS value chain should be lower than CO2 price. In this page, I show the MOL's the commercial activities for CCUS initiative all over the world. And this slide shows the technical study of the ships in collaboration with various partners. I want to emphasize the collaboration with a range of partners is a crucial element in addressing the various challenges we face. And this is the last page. The ship shown in this slide is equipped with multiple wind challenger that the MOLs is pursued. Initiative aimed at reducing fuel consumption by using wind power as a support. I introduce it at the end because we would like to apply such kind of technologies to CO2 transport ships. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Daisuke. Please take your seat. And in the interest of time, we will skip the poll questions now, and we will go to the panel discussion, and we will come back to the polling questions right at the end. So thank you very much for all the presentations, and we are also joined by Mr. Atsumasa Sakai from the ADB, and I would like to give him an opportunity to just say a few words before we start the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernadette, and thank you very much for all the gathering early this morning for this topic, the CCUS. And we understand that the CCUS may not be popular at this moment, but this is something that would be getting more and more popular to achieve the so-called 1.5 degree scenario. And for that purpose, the ADB has supported this practice over the decade, starting from the Indonesia and China. And we also learned that the huge demand from the other countries, such as Vietnam, Bangladesh. And from the last year, that we have started the study to support India's oil refinery to develop the feasibility study of the CCUS plants. So therefore, this would be really a good momentum for us to pursue the CCUS deployment over the developing member countries. And this time that we have invited the industries, the front runners for the sessions. And I believe that you have learned a lot from these sessions. And now from the next 20 minutes is your time to make your questions to these global industrial leaders. Thank you very much, Dr. Bernadette.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start off the discussion by asking a few questions to the panel members, but please prepare your questions so that we can hear from the audience at the end. So first of all, bankability, that is the big issue. CCUS is being recognized as the essential tool to achieve the 1.5 degree scenario, but the infrastructure requires large investment. How can the financial viability of CCUS projects and services be strengthened? Would carbon credit revenues be enough? And any expected role from international development financiers? And I would like to direct this question to Thomas, please.
I think carbon taxation is really key to financing and getting a bankable project in place. I mean, the approach, again, if we look to other parts of the world that are maybe more progressed and consider the business model that's supporting Northern Lights, we saw the waterfall approach looking at breaking up the sources of finance and subsidy supporting already underwriting those projects. But I'd even suggest going a step further back and disaggregating the whole of the CCS value chain and really breaking each element of that value chain down and thinking about for the capture facilities or capture equipment at an existing plant or for a new plant, what is the right business model or policy incentive to support uptake in that part of the value chain. Then think about the transport network. Once CO2 is collected from a facility, how are we supporting the construction of a transport network, a new system of pipelines perhaps, to move that CO2. So for the capture side of things, there are potential models like a contracts for difference. It's been used in the UK to support capture and for industrial users, bringing capture into their facilities. That's quite an expensive method, but it's what the UK thinks is necessary to really move that industry and get them to invest in those technologies. On the transport network, if for the part of that that's pipeline, a CFD is probably not the right solution there. A different approach would be, again, what the UK is looking at is a regulated asset base. So similar to how regulated gas networks in Europe, in the UK, and North America and Australia are managed, to have a regulatory contract between the network and the regulator to determine how they recoup money from bill payers and how they spend that. That's thought to be a suitable means of funding that part of the value chain. Storage, I think, then has a separate set of considerations for it. So my thinking would be, we really need to take a step back and think about what is the appropriate policy tool to make the right sort of movement we want in each part of that value chain. And we can't ignore certain parts of that value chain, because there will be that cross-chain risk could really discourage market entrants to get involved, and they will look elsewhere in terms of where to invest.
That's great. Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. My next question to Arnab, the not in my backyard issue. How can CCUS overcome the possible safeguard concern by neighboring communities? And are there any lessons to be learned from international practices?
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is actually a concern coming from, I would say, mostly from the lack of the proper knowledge. And what happens that whenever we are trying to, for an example, set up a CC storage, carbon dioxide storage facility in one of the places, the neighboring community always get concerned, like, what is going to happen? Is it the carbon dioxide going to release, is going to have some seismic activity around the center, I'm going to get an earthquake? So these concerns are quite okay to understand, because they are not the scientists or researchers doing work on that. So there comes the importance of putting the policymakers, the scientists, the practitioners, and also very importantly, the neighboring community to get engaged all together. So over here, first, obviously we do a lot of studies before we put a single drop of carbon dioxide underground. But before putting that in the right implementation, we have to engage with the community together to showcase that, engage with them, and probably, if possible, involve them to showcase that how it is being done. And that knowledge ensures that it is actually a safe practice to do. And importantly, if there is a possibility of revenue generation, if the neighboring community can be also a part of that, that ensures that they also have a encouragement to do this and support this. And over here, I would also like to mention one of the things that are happening, especially in India. So enhanced oil recovery is looked upon as one of the most low-hanging fruits, where we can put carbon dioxide underground and we can recover more oil, which can give us more revenue. And most of them are situated in the oil fields, which are actually far away from the actual population density. So this point of the time, it remains very similar. But what we actually found, that how the oil companies are actually looking into it. For an example, their concern is not first that to put carbon dioxide, their main concern is to get more oil out of it. And when we actually are able to align that this carbon dioxide storage is going to give you more oil, now they're actually getting more interested. So we think we have to go through the similar point of thought, like what is there for the neighboring people over there. Like if that is something will be encouraging for them, some interesting for them, obviously then we can actually make this thing much more feasible, much more facile.
Thank you very much. And it is a growing concern in communities, and I believe education and knowledge is the way to tackle this issue. The next question I would like to ask to Masumi-san. Should the government provide CCUS services by themselves in developing countries, or can the private sector still run CCUS services there? And if so, what support from the government should be expected?
Thank you for the question. This question is not easy to answer, even in Japanese. So I took a while to consider about these questions. And I heard many discussions about the developing countries' government usually facing the budgetary limitation, and they don't have extra budget for the CCS project. So usually the people say they're looking for explore the climate or transition fund in addition to governmental subsidies, but I thought this doesn't fit to their developing country, so I came up to mind some ideas from other examples from the government. There are two examples. The one is like Indonesia and the Malaysia. The CCS cost linked to upstream oil and gas development would be covered by the product sharing contract the government determined last year. And this would allow operators to recover the cost of a facility, a minimum facility of CCS. And furthermore, the fact that some storage facilities such as transportation or storage or pipelines already in place may reduce the business and technology risk, and the technology risk to expand the facility receive more CO2 from outside. That would be better, much better than building the facility from scratch. So in consequence, I thought this would attract the other public-private investment under this scheme. And I found another example, the Australian case. Australia does not provide subsidies for CCS. They provide very small subsidies for only capture process, but strictly enforce the emission cap and the safeguard mechanism reform that is really strict. For example, every year the huge emitter companies need to reduce like 4.9% every year. And these push the emitters need to introduce CCS in their project plan. And Australian federal government's answer to the call for CCS subsidies was not to mention money, the subsidies, anything, but mention that the government would provide the laws and regulations and incentive schemes, such as carbon credit, to implement CCS project. And certainly, having those legal framework and schemes in place will have the effect of reducing uncertainty of the business model. So this would be another option for the government who doesn't have enough budget. But I believe that this also reduce the international competitiveness of the industry of that country. So yeah, we need much more discussion about these questions.
Thank you very much for that. And yes, we know we can follow, all governments can follow one of two routes, the carrot or the stick. And we see the carrot method being implemented in the US very effectively, the 45Q, etc. And then, as Masumi-san mentioned, the stick method, which is the cap on emissions and reducing baselines every year. Thank you very much for that. My next question goes to Daisuke. On transboundary movement of CCUS, what sort of framework should be in place among players along the CCUS value chain that would need to facilitate the transboundary CCUS? And do you have any insights from developments in Singapore, Indonesia, and other examples?
Thank you very much. As I explained in my presentation, it is so important to further advance the framework of the legal preparation for transporting CO2 between two countries. And in Japan, where MOL head office is located, there is already engaging in dialogues aimed at forming agreements with various Asian countries. I hope such movement expand further. To facilitate transboundary CCUS, I believe it's necessary to resolve the issue of double counting of CO2 reduction between several countries. And also it's very important to set a unified price for CO2. So in this context, the EU ETS could be the good example. And we should spread to the global society, so as a good business model. And also the discussion on the CO2 specifications, which I also brought up in my presentation, is also considered an important element for cross-border transportation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if Ms. Nisan has
May
something
I
to add.
some to that? My team is supporting Ministry of METI of Japan to discuss the bilateral discussion to make a bilateral arrangement with the countries. And we did some research on EU areas, the legal framework, and we realized also EISHI, European Commission, published a report that indicates the EU ETS and EU CCS are in the European EU country and EEA country, European Economic Areas countries, have those two directives, and that makes more easy to comply with London Protocol, because London Protocol is requires a permitting system and like safety mechanisms and environmental monitoring and those things, and those are already those rules are already set in these EU CCS and ETS directive. Even the covers the CO2 emission reduction counting without double counting. But if we move on, if we see the Asian situation, we don't have any unified platform or any unified rule. So at first, we need to facilitate more the bilateral and multilateral, and including inter-region the discussions how to make the more kind of like not unified but more comfortable rule to establishing these cross-border shoots transportation project in here.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience or any of the panel members? Do we have a microphone somewhere, please? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentations. I'm Stephanie in Singapore. I'm curious to see, you show us a lot of examples of initiatives across the world, but in terms of Southeast Asia, outside, let's put China, excluding China, because we see that China is pretty advanced. Which countries in the region do you see more potential to invest more in CCUS initiatives based on, for example, their level of readiness and the impact that it would make?
Thank you for that question. Who would you like to direct that question to? Thomas?
I'm happy to make a start, and my fellow panelists can add to it. I think the picture is probably quite mixed in terms of the different parts of the CCS value chain. Overall, I think Asia and the Pacific region do have excellent storage, geology and capacity, and I think will be a front runner. Australia Indonesia, Malaysia, I would say are the most advanced and have the best offshore storage capacity in the region. I think Korea and Japan, and we've heard a little bit today about it, are certainly investing in making the value chain work, and also on the capture side of things to put in place incentives and support for industry on the capture side. On the transport, it's going to have to be a collective effort to, and again we've heard that today, to work through the challenges in putting in place a new transport network, a lot of investment in ships, on the design, on the build of those to get those right. And then we've not spoken too much about the utilization, but I think the utilization is going to be an increasing opportunity for Asia Pacific. Airlines, for example, they need a CO2 source that is sustainable. Whether that's whether the CO2 from industry is something thereafter probably depends on regulations that emerge around the world, but there will be lots of uses for a CO2 molecule if it can be put in the right place for those requirements.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to add a few points there. I also think that the countries who will be ready will be the ones who can provide policy certainty to investors, and countries who have their legal and regulatory frameworks for permitting and regulation of storage activities in place. And then the countries who will be first with the bilateral agreements and arrangements, because you can have all the storage resources in the world, but if you don't have that bilateral agreement in place or an arrangement meeting the requirements of the London Protocol, you cannot accept the CO2 and you cannot store it under the seabed. So policy, regulatory certainty and bilateral agreements, I would say, would be a key going forward. Any other questions from the audience?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Point.
Hatsumasa?
So in terms of the general motivation of the CCS investment is a larger trend of the world. For example, the EU had just started the pilot of the CBAM, the carbon border adjustment. So this would affect the countries which have the so-called hard to abate industry, which also count on the revenue from exporting their material to those countries. So in that sense, our story has focused on the storage side, but for the emitter side, this would be their incentive to invest in the carbon capture facilities, such as steel industry and other industries. So these are the motivation for those countries who have these sectors. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the audience?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm from Ramble, and my name is Hao Xin. We're a technical advice originated from Denmark, and we're also quite actively participating in the CCUS space. I have two questions today for the panelists. The first one is, to probably whoever wants to address it. From capture to final storage, from your perspective, how much percentage of CO2 can be sequestrated, considering all the losses, the transport emission, and all these life cycle emissions? Yeah, and then I understand that this is also relevant to distance, technology readiness, and all these other technical and commercial readiness, but then just from your perspective, what would be the approximate percentage of CO2 that can be finally sequestrated? My second question is also to build up on what Stephanie just asked before. In view of this low carbon tax in the ASEAN countries, when do you foresee that large scale CCS projects could be deployed in the future? Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone who would answer the first one? How much or what is the percentage of captured CO2 that can be stored?
I'm not the engineer, so I hope someone can answer.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, this is a very good question, and this is some of the things we have to look forward when we're actually capturing carbon dioxide. Let's say I'm capturing 1 ton of carbon dioxide, and when I'm storing it, how much we can store. So first of thing comes like, what is the specific technology we are actually using? And with respect to the technology, when we are capturing it, at which form we are capturing. So for an example, most of them right now produce pure stream of carbon dioxide in the gaseous form. And from the gaseous form, when we try to transport it, typically we can do that in the gaseous form, or we can liquefy it, then we transform. And during this phase transition, we typically suffer some of the losses. And also very important, like what is the distance? And that is why it is very important to find out exactly where I'm going to set up our carbon dioxide capture unit, because that has to be balanced. And for that, it will be much easy rather than capturing the carbon dioxide first and convert it to a pure stream of carbon dioxide to the storage space, rather than use the flue gas itself, because it is much more easy to handle with respect to the 100% CO2, and transport that to a space where we can have the capture and then connect it properly to the storage space. So those are actually go through a multiple different calculation, multiple different scenario adjustment, and then we actually do that. And secondly, the thing comes like, that is the only way to transport carbon dioxide. And for that, we come up with new innovative ideas. So one of the ideas we are actually looking into, can we use water as a vessel for transporting carbon dioxide? We are doing that. Biology is doing that forever. Our blood is actually streaming carbon dioxide. So can we actually replicate those processes to make it better? But obviously, they actually has to go through this TRL ladder to get to the readiness level where industry will be interested to invest into it. So all those things, considering together, we found like it is more of like a joint effort to put together, where we can actually put different scenarios to the industries and then found which will be the most useful for them. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I would like to take the second question. So when do you see large-scale CCUS being deployed? That will all depend on the approach globally, because as I said earlier, we need 1 gigatons of stored CO2, captured and stored CO2 by 2030. And at the moment, a CCUS project, and Thomas can correct me if I'm wrong here, takes about 6 to 8 years to develop. So we would really need accelerated project development timelines to start off with. We would need significant finance from the private and the public sector to fund these projects. We would need a change of mind in that area, I would say. I personally believe that there's so much focus on the replacement of fossil fuels with renewable energy, but it's in the power sector, yes, you can do that, but there are other uses of fossil fuels that cannot be replaced by solar and wind and other renewable energy. There is a portion that CCS is needed for, and as I alluded to earlier, the IEA reckons 15% of emission reductions must come from CCUS. And then thirdly, infrastructure must be in place. So governments will have to start investing in infrastructure and investigating business models around networks and hubs to make use of economies of scale and risk reduction when you have a network set up and a hub set up with storage resources in proximity. All those things will work together before we will see a large-scale deployment of the technology. I hope that answers your question.
May I add a little bit of the second question? The Malaysia Petronas is declaring that they will start CCS hub project in 2028, and the Japanese advanced CCS project is requiring the CO2 first day of CO2 injection should be 2030. And Indonesia, they set the presidential decree in place and referring the rules of the cross-border transportation. And even the second tiers, we analyze the second tiers are Thailand and Vietnamese. We are working with the government to exploring the suitable CO2 storage site. So they are following. So maybe in around 2030, as Bernadette mentioned, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Masumi-san. Right, we are completely out of time. So, Darshak, I don't know, you have a question.
No, I just wanted a small clarification from what Dr. Datta said. Is it, did I understand it correctly that you can transport the flue gas rather than CO2? Did I understand it correctly?
Yes. So what happens, like once we actually capture the carbon dioxide, it is 100% pure carbon dioxide is a much more difficult beast to control compared to 10 to 15% mixed with other gases. So that is much easier to handle. And when we actually try to compress them and try to ready to like inject it, only at that point of time we need 100% pure carbon dioxide. So is it a better option to capture that just before we inject rather than capture that like 5 kilometers away of the system?
That can increase the volume so much, and that can increase volume of the gas so much, at least 6
Yes.
times to say 20 times, and so I was just wondering whether
Yes, so what do we actually do, like when we're doing the full technical analysis, like which of them is actually economically more viable? So at that point of time, like transporting it versus capturing or handling the huge amount of gas. So that we actually combine it together, and that actually very important, like exactly where we to have this hub of capturing the carbon dioxide. We are bringing different flue gases together, and then we are actually handling it.
Thank you, that's very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Darshak, I'm not sure if you want 5 questions for polling to end this session. All right, we are out of time. Any other questions? Maybe a last question from the audience? No further questions? Then I would like to thank the panel of experts for their sterling job that they did today, and I hope you go away with a lot of new information and a lot of perspective on CCUS and how to achieve net zero by 2050. Thank you very much.